Okay, let's begin with the prayer of the day. O
God, our strength, without you we are weak and wayward creatures. Protect us from all dangers that attack us from the outside, and cleanse us from all evil that arises from within ourselves, that we may be preserved through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen.
That says it all.
That's a really good prayer of the day. It's a very Lutheran prayer of the day in terms of viewing. You know, I've always had this struggle. Let's kind of begin with this thought. I've had this struggle with the idea that I am both unworthy of God's love and yet made worthy by God. Have you ever thought about that? You know, we talk kind of in a dualistic manner about ourselves, humanity, that we're both unworthy and yet worthy. And it's a dichotomy, as much of life is, and I'm okay with the both and-ness of it. I'm both worthy and unworthy, I think, by my own behavior. So going back to what we just talked about, Sandy, by my own behavior, I'm unworthy of God, or of God's kingdom, of heaven, of deserving forgiveness by my own behavior. But because of God's grace and mercy and forgiveness, I am made worthy of that love and heavenly home.
Isn't that why he gave us the Lord's Prayer?
I believe it is. Yeah. And this prayer kind of speaks to that. Without you, we are weak and we are wayward. Protect us from all dangers that attack from the outside, and cleanse us from all evil that arises from within ourselves. And I know when we get to the book of the reading from James, we'll talk about that more. So we acknowledge that we do have evil within us, but we ask to be cleansed of it, and we ask that Christ be the one to do that work. So it's a very Lutheran way of thinking.
That verse, the prayer when it says we may be preserved through your Son, it's mindful of, we just went through a long session on looking at Bonhoeffer's book on discipleship. One thing that came out of there that impressed me was the emphasis that he put on Jesus Christ as the mediator for us. And I think when you look at that and you look at much, think about that in the terms of our struggles, evil, and so on, that if that's true, then he will be the mediator for our lives, however we live them. And I think he's the mediator for the person you talked about. If he's the mediator there, that for us is a great concept, because that's Christ's Son. And I really got that feeling from that discipleship. Like, there's a sections in there on that, and that impressed me more than much of what he said about discipleship. But that was one thing, the role of Jesus as a mediator in our lives today.
And we call the Holy Spirit an advocate too.
Sure.
So if we have a mediator and an advocate as part of the triune God, we don't need to live in fear of being misjudged for how we live. So, okay. Would someone like to read Deuteronomy 4:1-2 and 6-9?
I will.
Okay, thank you, Rachel.
So now Israel, give heed to the statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. You must neither add anything to what I command you, nor take away anything from it, but keep the commandments of the Lord your God, with which I am charging you. You must observe them diligently, For this will show your wisdom and discernment to the people, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call to him? And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that I am setting before you today? But take care and watch yourselves closely, so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this is talking about observing the law when they get into the land that God was giving them, the land of Canaan. And it is Moses speaking a word to them about being diligent, about observing commandments and statutes and laws, that they might be a wise people, that other people may look at them as being near to God and blessed by God. And there are a couple themes that come up that we'll talk about, but I wanted to begin with saying this. We live in a heated time right now, a time of where people are fighting about whether or not to get a vaccine, whether or not they should have to mask in public. It's a time where obeying commands and rules and guidelines is fought against in the name of personal freedom. So I wanted to ask, why do you think as a humanity, as people, do we push back? Why do you think we tend to push back against rules and laws and guidance?
We think we know better.
We think we know better.
Because we think all laws and governmental demand is not necessarily coming from God.
Okay, we think that maybe it's not God ordained,
Right.
It's human imposed.
That's right.
Okay,
They don't want to be told what to do.
yeah, we don't like to be told what to do. We think we know better. We question the authority of it. We don't like to be told what to do. Yeah.
It's the humanity in this, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the hubris of humanity, the arrogance to think that, like you said, Tom, that we know best. I just thought that was kind of a theme that I see popping up still today, that people don't like obeying guidelines.
Well, that's, people say freedom, freedom.
It's
But
like-
with freedom comes responsibility.
Well,
And
but
if you want to be responsible, you don't want other people end up with the virus because you are, and, that kind of thing. They're very concerned about themselves, but not about other people.
Me society.
But
It's a me
Oh,
society.
definitely.
yeah, me.
Mhm.
But it is the me when they end up in the hospital on a ventilator. The nurses don't come in and say, well, how do you feel about your freedom now? They don't have any decision-making powers, a ventilator. They're on there and they're at the mercy of all kinds of people, and they don't have any, I guess they do have the right to refuse it. But
Yeah, they do have that right. Most people at that point would not want to.
They'll
Yeah.
beg for it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not trying to make this a heated political discussion, please
Yeah.
know that. I am making a point, though, about the human proclivity to push back against guidance and laws and ordinances, and we see that in Deuteronomy.
But my niece belongs to a church that preaches, if you have enough faith, you don't need this vaccine.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't understand that.
okay, I would like to speak to that. That is a good point. And Rick,
The other night, the Worthington School Board met, and there were
38 people, I think, registered to speak. And this same question was addressed.
What question specifically? Like
The question of individual freedom.
individual freedom,
And
okay.
one of the anti-mandate people said that what has always made our country so great is our freedom to choose. And the following speaker said that she had two children enrolled in high school at Thomas Worthington, and that the teacher of one of the children had sent home, and at that point, high school students and teachers were free to choose whether or not to wear masks. But the teacher of the class that one of her children was in sent home an email the first day after class and requested that parents would please have their children wear masks in her class because she is at risk. She's pregnant and she has some immune issues, and she said, what makes our country great is the ability we have to sacrifice our rights for the common good of others. That's what makes our community strong, it's what makes our schools strong, and so forth. And we've been involved in this conflict between my rights and the common good since the founding of this country.
I'll interject one thing. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, was not written in a blasé manner. There was a great deal of compromise, a great deal of agreement with disagreement for them all to come to that agreement. So all gave something to have a common good. And we forget that. They all surrendered part of their own lives and the way they lived to do that. And we think, oh, no, they didn't, but they did. They really did. And we don't understand those men and who they represented well enough to understand that. So the compromising process of individuals giving up for the common good.
Right. So, Rachel, I will come back to your point. So, this is a family member, a niece, you said?
Yes.
Who attends a church, who they tend to extol faith in place of taking vaccines.
Right.
I saw an interview on TV, two EMTs in Texas who had not been vaccinated yet against COVID-19. And one said, I know, I'm a hypocrite. I just haven't had time. I'm gonna do it. I don't know why I haven't. I need to get vaccinated. The other said, well, my family, we pray a lot, and we believe in God, and that we don't need to get a vaccine, something to that effect. And that is people's right to feel that way. I would be curious for the church that your niece attends, and for this EMT that I saw on TV, I would want to ask if they take Tylenol when they have a headache, if they use any kind of antibacterial ointment when they get a cut, if they go to a hospital when they need to. Because unless they deny all use of medicine, I don't think that's a valid excuse, is to say, I pray I don't need to get a vaccine.
I don't think it's valid either.
Because I pray and I take medicine. Most people do. We believe that God has gifted humanity with ways of keeping ourselves healthy. I have a tickle in my throat. And in the same way that we believe that we need to eat to stay healthy, or get enough sleep to stay healthy, there are things that we need to that we can take and do to keep ourselves healthy. But certainly it's people's right to view faith in God any way they want. But I do find a little bit of a dilemma when people still seek out medical help in times of need, or take ibuprofen or any kind of medication, but don't want to get a vaccine. There is a little bit of a mental dilemma that I have with that, but
My daughter is a Christian, and she did not want to take the vaccine because she has a good friend that is a nurse who was very leery of this vaccine and told her all the reasons. But she and her husband got the vaccine. My grandson got it because he worked in a nursing home.
mm-hmm.
Now, my granddaughter, who is 16, has not had it, the vaccine. And I said to my daughter just on Sunday, you know, I'm really concerned about Olivia not getting the vaccine because she has autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, to me, that's a good reason to get it.
Yeah.
But here's what my daughter said. I'm concerned about this causing sterility and her not being able to have any children.
They put that on
Huh?
they put that on television.
Yeah, and she said because there has not been enough, she doesn't think there's been enough research
Mm-hmm.
done for children and what's gonna happen to them down the road. And I personally didn't wanna take it because I was concerned about what could happen later in my life, but then I decided I'm later in my life already. And so, you know, if it ends up killing me, it ends up killing me. And Bill really would be
Yeah.
good. So we got it, but then I also have a younger son who, he's in his 40s. He's got 4 kids. None of his family's gotten the vaccine. And he says, Mom, I don't even get a flu shot. And I think he is one of these people that has the faith
I need to go get a refill.
that God is going to protect them. I think he's got that much faith that they're going to be protected.
Yeah, look at Jackie Jackson though. Yeah, I'm sure that man has a lot of faith and he's
I
in the
know,
hospital.
I know, it's just, it's each to his own, you know, it's like there's the freedom. You can either get it or not get it, and
Sandy, why do they worry about the 16? If she doesn't get the shot and she ends up and gets COVID and God forbid dies, she's gonna be sterile anyway.
you're absolutely right about that.
So why not ask God for protection, get the shot, and then go from there? Trust in God that when she gets the shot, she's not gonna be
Well,
sterile.
now, see, that's not my son's daughter, it's my daughter's daughter that's,
I don't
you
care
know.
whose daughter
Yeah,
it is.
Okay,
It's
so there's
hers
a
or ours.
difference in, I mean, I don't know if my daughter has the same belief as my son, you know, that God's gonna protect. I think, you know, and here she's going to school now.
In a way, it's challenging God.
Yeah,
What?
In a way, it's challenging God.
Oh, I never thought about
Yeah,
it like that,
you're
but
right,
that's,
Russ.
I mean, you know, Erin didn't say anything about her personal Christian attitude about this. She's just afraid that Libby could end up sterile.
and maybe Libby would grow up and never marry, so she wouldn't need children. There's a lot of different things to think about.
Oh, I know.
But if you don't live
But
long
this
enough to
is-
get that old.
A lot of the modern medication that we have, like, I remember when I was pregnant, umpteen years ago, the doctor said to me, if you have a headache, take aspirin. She said aspirin was a way older medication that they had a good history on, and she said, we're not sure about acetaminophen and things like that.
That's the only thing that ever worked for me, was to take an aspirin.
And I'm not allowed to take aspirin.
Huh?
And I'm not allowed to take
But
aspirin.
you know, it's a medication that has a long history, but we take a lot of medications that don't have a long medication, that when they say to you when you're 25, you need to say acetaminophen, we don't say, oh, I wonder if that's gonna make me sterile. And yet, you know, that may be, I don't know, it's an interesting,
Well, these are all valid concerns too, and I think life is always about risk-taking.
oh, yeah.
You could say the same thing about a seatbelt. Some people get in a car accident and a seatbelt damages their rib cage or sternum, but may save their life. Well, the vaccine could very well be the same kind of comparison. It could possibly cause a birth defect. It's not yet shown to, but it could also save one's life too, and the baby's life. You know, we only have the info that we have, and we have to do what's best, we think. We always have to weigh the options, so.
If you want to live in fear, read the side effects of anything you take.
Yes, that's so true.
I mean, come on.
Anything that's
There's a risk when you walk out this door.
That's right.
How many people take time to read that real fine print?
I do, and it scares me to death, so
I do too now. I didn't used to as a younger person, but I do now.
It's kind of scary when you look at the,
Listen to the ads on TV, take our product, but, and then they list all this stuff. It may be worse than what
Thank
you're
you
taking.
so much.
If you're allergic to it, well, how do you know if you're allergic to it?
Thank you, that's a question I've always wondered.
ever taken it,
How do you know?
My doctor always says the benefits of taking the medication outweigh the risks.
hopefully.
Yeah.
So I'm trusting her.
Yeah.
So in
Mine
terms
says
of
it's-
Deuteronomy, we're talking about obedience, okay? Obedience to laws, and in the thought that these will be a communal people of God, that obeying these laws will help them to be a closer community dedicated to God. Now-
Pastor Scott, wasn't this the thing of Christ coming to fulfill the law so that they didn't have to do all of this that they talked about in
Yes.
the Old Testament?
Well, yes, but we're still in,
The
we're
Old
not in the
Testament.
promised land yet.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes.
My
So
history.
how we view it today does need to be filtered through that lens. But, so obedience for the Israelites meant several things outlined here. Life, obedience would give life. It would give them possession of a promised land. It would give them a sense of community, and it would give them esteem in the eyes of others. But obedience was also about remembering what God had done. You know, we talked last week about how easy it is to forget. And I said, I think the worst thing about the pandemic will be our inability to remember, having a short memory and forgetting the death toll that we've incurred, forgetting the pain, forgetting the losses, forgetting the financial and economic toll, and I think sometimes we get in a hurry to get back to normal, whatever we feel that is, and I think that sense of forgetting and wanting to move away from the past, it's the same dilemma that we often see in the Old Testament. Forgetting what God had done in Egypt, forgetting what He had provided to the Israelites. And so...
And what He provides for us today.
So this is definitely, obedience is about remembering what God had done. Even as the Israelites wanted to push back against obeying laws and being bound by them, they were meant to be life-giving. As I believe the medical guidance today is still meant to be life-giving, even if we don't view it that way. I think all the laws that restrict us in life, that I have to wear a seatbelt, that I have to pay auto and home insurance, that I have to
Pay taxes.
that I have to pay
Yeah,
taxes,
taxes.
that I have to obey speed limits. We are continually bound by things in society that people, yes, want to fight against.
But there's a reason. There's a reason
Right.
for that. It's to protect us. God gave
So
us
did
the
the
Ten
vaccine.
Commandments to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Jews went ahead, or the Israelites went ahead and added all those other rules. I guess they thought it was for protection.
And so Moses mentions that here, not to add anything to what I command you, nor take anything from it, but keep the commandments the Lord your God gave you, with which I am charging you today.
So then they went ahead and made all those other rules to live by. Well, that wasn't being godly, was it?
So the theme that we'll find through Deuteronomy and James and into Mark is, especially in Mark, is how even life-giving commandments and rules, when they become a burden to people, when they become non-life-giving, when they become obsessive and hindering to people being able to be accepted into the temple or to feel that they're accepted by God, when a rule becomes that hindering, it's no longer life-giving. It's no longer helpful. And we'll see that theme again and again.
Oh, wasn't that what the Pharisees did? They added to the Ten Commandments.
Well, I don't know that they added to them, but they certainly imposed a lot of Old Testament Deuteronomical laws. They imposed these on people. We'll see it in Mark specifically with the Pharisees and the scribes being so hung up on ritual cleanliness that they missed the deeper point of what it means to be pure. They're thinking of purity in terms of what goes in through the hands, through the mouth, into the body, and they're missing the point that it's what comes out of the heart or the mouth by way of what we say to people that becomes really, that's the heart of it. What comes out can defile people. What comes out of the heart, out of the mouth, the things we do and the ways that we act, that can defile people, not what people take in. So Jesus once again kind of flipped the law on its head, and he's asking people really to think about laws logically. And he did that with the Sabbath too, right? He said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And what he meant by that is, yes, I know that you have a Jewish law that says you are not to work on the Sabbath. But he was saying, but if you see a man with his foot caught in a hole in the Sabbath, on the Sabbath, what is more helpful and loving, to let him stay there stuck and suffering, or to work and to get him unstuck out of the hole? So again, he was making the point of don't stick to the letter of the law if it becomes unloving and uncharitable and unlife-giving. So, do we want to go ahead and look at James now?
Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creation, of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore rid yourselves of all sordidness, and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word, and are not doers, They are like those who look at themselves in a mirror, for they look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious, and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Well, that's a high order, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Marcia. It is. Yes, Luther did not like the book of James. He felt that it was too focused on obedience, too focused on what we do as a means of salvation, possibly. I don't know that I view James quite that way, but I think this text, it challenges us to both be aware of the gifts that come from above, from God, things that God has blessed us and the world with. And then it challenges us also to then act, be doers of the word in ways that honor God. So we'll kick off with that. I want to ask you all, what stands out to you in this epistle?
Well, I can tell you I have a friend who listens to Glenn Beck religiously and Fox News. And she is beyond upset. I mean, beyond upset for what is happening to the Christians in Afghanistan.
Okay.
She is so distressed that it is affecting her sleep. And I said, okay, Paula, but what can you do about it? And she said, well, I did call my senator or my House of Representatives. She called somebody Monday. She said this Laura, somebody that's on Fox News, says there's 100 things that we can do as citizens of this country to get things changed. And I said, the thing is, it takes years to get laws changed. And what are you going to do? I mean, I said, the only thing I know is to pray about this. And I quoted the Serenity Prayer to her. I mean, I'm upset that she's so upset. Because, I mean, she, like I said, she is beyond upset. She is so stressed about this. And this could be one reason, you know, she's a Christian and she believes in what the Bible says, that we are to take care of our neighbor, you know, and she feels like there's things she should do, but she's not doing them. I said, all I know then is to find out what you can do and do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to do about it except pray about it, but I feel so bad about these Christians that are being persecuted. She said the Taliban is going door to door, and if they ask for their phones, and if these people have a Bible app on their phone, they are killing them. And then I heard another story where they take these girls or boys and they give them a knife and they have them cut their Christian friend's throat. I mean, I
certainly
said,
this stuff has happened around the world. I don't know how bad it has become in Afghanistan, but it's like trying to rid the world of evil. Certainly 100 things that each of us would have to do would be a high order, and like you said, it would take years to change laws, but ultimately that's why we have a democratic system where we elect officials who know the best ways to to conduct, how do I want to say this, to prevent evil from happening.
I don't know. I don't know. I think there's such evil on both sides of the government, the Democrats and the Republicans, that she is so upset with Biden, you know, she just wants to, she'd
Well,
like to get rid of him
Well,
because
sure,
of
but
this decision.
anytime you blame, you know, one single leader,
Watching Fox News.
That's what I told her. I said,
Yeah.
stop watching the news.
she's
Just
watching
stop
yeah,
watching it.
probably watching
Yeah.
the news can be very biased.
Well, you can't believe everything you hear.
We have to remember that we're not in charge.
That's, I told her that,
God is
I
in
told her
charge.
that, Rachel.
And we have to let that control that we think we can do something.
Yeah.
And that's controlling her. She's got to remember that God is in charge.
I told her.
And He's gonna bring good out of all this evil. We don't know how, we don't know when, but we have to trust that He will.
I do commend her compassion
Oh, she.
and willingness to make a phone call above just posting something on Facebook or ranting about it. I think if more of us did make those calls to Congress, women and men and senators and diplomats, that, you know, I do think that there is power in the voices of many people to create change. But I also believe that we cannot rid the world of evil. There will always be factions like the Taliban that are persecuting innocent people. And that's where I'm thankful that we do have leaders in the military that do their best to know when to act and when not to act. Now, but to expect that they'll get it right all the time, I don't think is fair either. And to blame one leader, one human leader, to fix all of the problems in the Middle East is probably misguided too. But I do commend her compassion and care for the people of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I've been wrestling with this question for 60 years.
60?
60. I went to seminary because I thought maybe we could figure out how to really change things. And I got no answer. You know, James says, be doers of the word and not hearers only. And then you kind of picked up on the, you know, what God is saying is, look, I've given you certain gifts. You're supposed to use those gifts to serve one another in love, not to do your own thing. I don't have any confidence in our leaders. They're in the many of them, not all, but many of them are in the back pocket of lobbyists. We don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. And they're going to do what the lobbyists want them to do.
She talked
My
about
job
this
as a
very thing.
Christian is to do what God called me to do. To do the good works that God prepares for me to do, so that I live a life worthy of my calling. And, you know, that means I make calls. I send emails that never get answered. But it's all I can do. And I wish that the church would separate itself in a way that we feel the power. And I don't envy your position or Pastor Bonnie's position. I'm glad I'm not in the ministry now, and I'm retired. But I think we're missing an important point by not providing, how do I want to say this? Reminding people almost of their responsibility as, you know, you're supposed to be doers of the word, not hearers only. Okay, I'm done.
Well, I want to address what you said about the churches, because I did listen to Glenn Beck on Monday, and there was a guy on there talking about the Nazarenes have collected a whole bunch of money to help these Afghanistans get out of the country. But if they don't have the right paperwork, they can't get out. Okay, so he says, where are the churches? Why aren't the churches doing anything about this whole situation? I mean, I don't know, the government, I think the government is crooked as it can be, and you can't rely on the government. They're not representing the people.
Well, a whole bunch, in fact, in the New York Times this morning, they reported that a bunch of people, I didn't say how many, I think it was maybe 20 or 25 or 40, something like that, who worked for the New York Times, got out of Afghanistan, got the documentation they needed, not from our government, but from the Mexican government.
Oh my.
And they went to Mexico.
Oh,
And there's other countries doing that to get them out,
Well,
not us.
my friend Paula, the one I was just talking about, said that the, this Boris Johnson, the
Prime
United
Minister.
Kingdom,
United
Prime Minister.
tried for 40 hours to reach President Biden to talk to him about doing something different. And I understand the military also advised him to do something different.
Yeah.
And he's not backing down. He did not answer that Boris Johnson could not get in touch with President Biden because he didn't want to be gotten in touch with.
Let me pull us back in a minute. It's okay, it's okay, but doers of the word. Okay, so you both have kind of alluded to, the church needs to be that leader, that example. Well, it's easy to overlook the ways, though, that we are, and I'll give you a local example that even All Saints is connected to. First English Lutheran on the near east side of Columbus did provide sanctuary housing for a woman named Miriam Vargas from like 2017 till early this year. She's finally free to live on her own again. That means they put her up and housed her because the government was threatening to send her back to Central America to be separated from her kids who were born in the U.S. Okay, so, and again, not to make this political, but they took a big step in providing housing, food, and care for a very long time, years. And that made national news. And that is an example of us being a doer of the word.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also recognizing that we can only do so much. That was only one woman, one individual, one case of many, but it was, so it reminds me that we can't fix all the problems of the world, but we can do something. Gordon.
We must recognize that the government did recognize sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
So don't kick the government in the head all the time.
Well, and I'm not at all.
They let her stay there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking against the government. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that was an example of a church doing
Sure.
what they needed to do at the time to help a woman who is going to be separated permanently from her kids. And do we do enough? None of us do enough.
I think James does kind of give us an answer.
Okay.
He says we should be slow to anger.
Yes. Well, and quick to answer.
Oh,
Serious about that. Slow to
what's the
anger.
next step?
And especially about things over which we can have no personal control. Secondly, he says, care for the orphans and the widows and what's going on around you.
Mhm. Yeah.
That, if you do that, you know, you'll have changed somewhat the world. You're never going to change Afghanistan. Don't ever think you're going to do that. That's going to take time. Listen, I lived through Korea, lived through Nam, lived through the end of World War II. You live through those things. You try to do what you can impassioned in the way. Don't forget the Marshall Plan and things we've done. But we're living in a world over which 99% we have absolutely no control over.
I want to ask you
Even as a government, slow to anger. And I believe, hey, I get very angry during the
Okay, Gordon, I want to ask you,
Yeah.
because Paula, my friend brought this up. She says, we still have troops in Korea, we still have troops in Germany, we still have troops in Japan, blah, blah, blah. So why are they pulling all of the troops from Afghanistan? Does anybody know that answer?
Why are they putting what?
Pulling. Why are they taking
All the
all
troops
of
out.
the troops out of
They should have
Afghanistan?
done it 20 years ago.
Yep.
Oh,
But her
what?
question
Probably should
is,
have done
why
it
are
20
they
years
still
ago.
in Korea, Germany, Italy,
All
all
those-
these other countries? Why are we still in all these other countries when they're pulling them completely out of Afghanistan? That's what she's asking.
Well, why are some of those countries still there right now?
What do you mean, why are they still?
Well, they've got troops there right now.
That's the point.
That's the point she's trying to
Yeah.
get to you.
That's
And they
the,
came back because we were there.
well, there's still Americans in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
But they can't, so they
You
can't
want to take them
protect
out right now?
I think the miscommunication is, are you saying
But-
that they're providing stability?
Yeah.
They
But
were.
they're taking them out, that's it. The stability is gonna go away.
Yep, they can't protect them.
Well, we don't know why. We don't know why
And they
because we're
left
not
all
at the
I
the
highest
know, I
levels of
wonder
the
if
military.
Gordon knew why.
You take them out, well, I don't know.
Does anybody know why they're
I'll
taking
only answer
everybody
that.
out?
I'll answer that and I say, thank goodness for President Johnson. He got us out of Vietnam and we really got hurt, and Nam got hurt when that happened.
Yeah.
We knew that was going to happen. You can't save another country's divided problems. You cannot do that. We tried to do it in Afghanistan, we tried to do it in Korea, tried to do it in Nam. You cannot do that without creating a dilemma of which says you have to withdraw at one time or another. And when you do, there's going to be only one word, that's chaos.
Is there a common theme in all of this?
Yeah.
To be found?
Yeah. Common theme is, when you have a divided country
Mm-hmm.
and you go in and take sides,
Mm-hmm.
chances are, as coming in as a foreign country, whatever side is doing well then, the other side will probably do better just because you're there. And we found that in Nam, we found that in Korea.
We have divided United States, how are we doing? We have the North and the South.
That's
here.
right.
So-
We never did that, did we?
I want to go back.
Reconstruction was a disaster.
I want to go. I want to go back to James 1:19. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. That is one of the most hard thing to do as people, isn't it? It's also hard to admit that we don't know always what the best path forward is, I think. And yes, we do depend on other people to make those good choices on behalf of all of us as a country. And it doesn't always happen. I find a common theme between Deuteronomy 4 and James 1, a call, again, to remember, like we talked about, and not forget all that God has done and all that God commands. So be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. And I think it's so easy all the time to be to have a passive faith. And I think James is kind of getting at that. Don't have a passive faith. Have an active faith. Be a doer. And I wanted to ask, and then he goes on the end to talk about how he would define pure and undefiled religion. But I want to ask, if this is about not having a passive faith, and again, we'll mention your friend Paula, who is attempting to do something to change a dire situation in the world. And again, that's commendable, because too many people have a passive faith and they simply post a rant online on social media and they leave it at that, and they think, okay, I've done my part. So I do commend people who make those phone calls, send those emails. But how would we define a passive faith?
Not doing anything.
Not doing anything.
And then
Okay.
God do everything.
Right now, the ELCA is collecting money to help the people in Haiti and to help the people in the fire things in California. So if
Sure.
nothing else, you can make a donation, a financial donation to them. 100% what you give to them goes to, and I was at after Katrina, I went down to work on the Ocean Springs down there, and the church was well represented there with disaster relief. So they are on hand. They do take people in to help on the ground, not just, they're there feeding the people, helping the people. So if you can't or won't do anything else besides praying, if you got an extra 20 or 50 bucks to send it to ELCA to help with these reconstruction things, I mean.
I did that just last month.
And so to that point, Marcia, it's not that the ELCA is trying to fix the root cause of wildfires and climate change. It's that we're trying to address an immediate effect or need.
And the same thing in Haiti,
And the same thing in Haiti.
And they're on the ground there. I
We-
mean, there are actually people there working.
We can't maybe fix the infrastructure and the stability of buildings to withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. We may not be able to do all of that completely, though a lot of people have, but we can meet immediate needs.
It sounds like right now, the whole world problem is all out there. The whole thing, you would believe what happened in Korea too. Just so much, the Christians or Buddhists or whatever, it's overwhelming. You can't solve any of these things. It seems like we don't really understand what the root cause is and what the real solution in a fundamental way. And everybody says, all the pastors, the one that I talk to, think this is the end times. And the scientists, the government, they think so too, in the sense that we'll never return to normal way. The technologists too will never return to what we call normal ways. It will completely change. So I got to thinking, because we don't really have the fundamental solution. We don't understand the fundamental cause of this. Maybe this has a lot to do with Jesus coming back. And when he comes back, maybe he'll tell us the real root cause and the solution. He might get to leave. I know some people think we'll all go to heaven, rapture and all this. But this must be, because it's beyond our ability to understand, do anything. So totally frozen. You don't know what to do individually, even if you want to.
Only time will tell.
You think so?
I think the critical thing that James says in verse 19 is, be quick to listen. And to listen means that if Gordon and I are having a disagreement, I am open to the possibility that Gordon has a better idea,
Yeah.
a better approach than I do. My problem is that I have a hard time letting go of the fact that I think I'm right.
That's right.
Don't we
And
all?
That's great.
Part of our, I guess the other part of our, the other side of that is, we have a hard time because the people on the other side of so many of the arguments today approach the discussion from the perspective of they're right and we're wrong.
That's right.
I need to entertain the possibility that maybe I'm not right, but they will not entertain the possibility that they're wrong.
We've
There's
lost
a
the
wonderful,
ability-
wonderful interview in this week's issue of Time magazine with the police officer who was beaten by the crowd, Van Cohn. And he was shocked that 2 days, January 8th, 2 days after the riot, one of the people he helped to save, one of the congressmen, who thanked him on the 6th, turned around on the 8th and said these were just people, these were normal tourists.
Yeah.
They weren't rioters.
It depends on who you listen to. I mean, that's a great thing, to be
Yeah.
a discerning listener.
Yeah.
And so don't watch Fox all the time.
Tom,
Don't watch CNN all the time.
I know, I mean,
Tom, you began to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna
Well,
say.
I'll need to
we've
turn
lost
our
the ability to
TVs off for
compromise.
about 3 years and come back to this after we have a chance to sit down and listen to each other.
Let's look at Mark 7, since we only have about 12, 13 minutes left. Mark 7. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? And he said to them, Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition. Then he called the crowd again and said to them, listen to me, all of you, and understand, there is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person.
Amen.
Some tough teaching, right?
Yeah, but you know what? Diseases come
From outside.
from uncleanliness.
Oh,
You must wash your hands, you must wash your dishes and your pots. I don't care. I mean, yeah, I believe what Jesus says, but he's not really addressing disease here.
No, he's not. He's not. That's exactly it. He's not addressing, because to be sick, like physically ill, because of uncleanliness is not defilement, as he's speaking of it.
But what comes from the disease is defilement.
Now, what comes from the disease is simply disease, being ill and sick.
But that's-
He's talking about defiled before God.
Well, I know. but
Defiled in
still.
terms of, you know,
Actions.
actions. Yeah, he's talking about, so they're talking about being ritually clean. Jesus is talking about being spiritually clean. He's talking about, like, does God reject people? Their laws and rituals said you cannot enter the temple if you're a woman who's menstruating. You cannot enter the temple if you haven't sacrificed a dove. You can't enter the temple if you're of this caste and class, or if you're defiled in some way, or if you've touched a dead body, and the list goes on. And it was all based on cleanliness. But Jesus was saying that is not what God looks at and cares about. And so, yeah, let's dive into that. Nothing outside a person that by going in can defile. In this gospel, I think we get
From within, the human heart.
so God is looking at actions, specifically actions that hurt people. Now, it is true disease can hurt people too. And I don't think Jesus is advocating don't wash your hands. He is looking at the Pharisees and the scribes and knowing a deeper intent that they had. So when they say, why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders but eat with defiled hands? It's like it would almost be like me saying to someone, why did you come into this church without shoes and pants? Why do you only have sandals on? And why aren't you clean shaven? Don't you see everyone else around is clean shaven? Why do you have tattoos? I don't see anybody else with tattoos. Have you bathed today? You don't smell like you bathed. You know, it's kind of getting at like we've missed the point of what matters to God.
Well, what's in your heart is what matters to God. Doing loving and kind things and teaching yourself, reading the Bible, reading the books that go with, to help you understand the Bible. I think that's what's important to God, how you treat your neighbor.
So I compare it to my daughter, my oldest, Lydia. As her dad, I spend probably too much time in a given week asking if her room has been cleaned up. Okay. So I'm building this metaphor in my head as I'm reading this. I spend a lot of time asking, have your clothes been put away? You need to put away these shoes. Your desk is a mess. Have you done all your homework? This needs to be put away. That needs to be put away. Have you taken a shower? Have you done this? Have you done that? I don't spend enough time saying, I'm proud of you, and this is what you did good today. So this is kind of the comparison that I think is being made in this gospel, that the Pharisees, I'm being a Pharisee to my daughter. I am spending an exorbitant amount of time focused on rules, human expectations, and not enough time loving, showing love and compassion.
It's showing we need to show the fruits of the Spirit. Isn't that what he's really pointing out?
I believe so.
That we're all human, and all of this we're going to do. It's because we are human. But there's the fruits of the Spirit. And God who looks at us and forgives us every day.
If Adam and Eve didn't sin, would we still get sick? Huh?
I believe we would.
You would?
I don't know that we would be plagued with sin, but just through living in a finite world with things such as toxins and bacteria and all the things that we live with, I think there would still be. I don't think the earth was meant to be heaven. Let me put it that way. So I think the world, even in its most original, perfect form, the perfect intent was to be in open, honest communication and love of God, and not, but still a finite world. Meaning, I believe the human body was always meant to live a certain amount of time and then die.
The last, starting with verse 21, when you read that, it says it comes from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come, and he lists them all. All these evil things come from in and they defile you. What question do you have in your mind when you hear that from Jesus?
How did a human heart be defiled?
How did it get defiled?
That's right. God wouldn't have created that way, for sure.
Right.
Or how do we prevent that defilement?
Exactly.
I think that's the question he's leading to, and he isn't here. But to me, that's the question I ask. Why? All these things are in us. How do they get there?
Right.
And what can we do to combat this?
That's why we need the Messiah.
That's the question I had to make.
That's why we need a Savior.
That's the question I had when I heard this. I thought to myself, yeah, that's good, good and well. So now what do we eat? But how did that stuff get there?
So this is a good Lutheran teaching moment, I think.
Yeah.
Verses 21 to 23, I would say I believe that we are sinful, flawed people who constantly need the help and mercy of God. And because when we act, it's often out of selfish motives.
Yeah.
And it does go back to everything that we've talked about today. War, hatred, anger, the things that people do in Afghanistan to one another, to the innocent. It speaks to injustice. It speaks to rioting in the United States. It speaks to everything that we do. Most of the time, and then to go back to James, we are not quick enough to listen. We are not slow enough to speak, and we are not slow enough to become angry. And out of all of that comes this mess of a world that I think we find ourselves in. So it is, all of these teachings become timeless in that humans always act out of selfishness. And it's only through the saving help of God that we can at times escape that.
I have to go back to Mark and see what he says after this.
Yeah, right?
What does he say after this?
Yeah, what's the solution?
Does he give a solution, or does he leave it up in the air? You know, I don't know. Anxious about reading Mark from here on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's mostly about wanting to be in control. Everybody wants to be in control.
Sure.
Every country in this world wants to be in control of everybody else.
Nobody wants to be controlled.
And I'm wondering if our country is going to lose control.
Quite possibly.
Perhaps we should stay in here for a little while longer.
Yes.
Eyes opened up.
Yes.
No, but the United States have to stay in control because this is the only Christian country. God has made it powerful. We can't back off from that. Because who else the Chinese gonna do?
So when we put too much focus on those around us, and when we focus on other people's behavior without ever looking within at our own sin, we become the Pharisee. So I think, to sum up Mark 7 as best I can, this is a teaching about looking within instead of making a quick judgment about somebody else. Looking at our own ability to be selfish and sinful instead of pointing out the flaws of somebody else. It's okay.
You know, we all may be called, there are a lot of refugees that are going to be coming from Afghanistan. And to put them in our country, I'm sure the churches are going to be called to help resettle those people.
Yes.
And if any of you worked on that group that came from Nepal a couple of years ago. That was a tough transition. That was a tough situation. Those people had been in a resettlement camp for 19 years before they came here. And yet they came without any preparation for moving into, and that's gonna be the situation of these people. Now, a lot of them, the husbands were translators, so at least they speak English. But the churches may be called on to help resettle those people. And we're talking,
Yes.
what, 20,000 people that they've moved?
But they're not all coming to the States, there's other countries taking them
Some of
in too.
them.
Yeah.
But we did that with Vietnam. I know our church in Marion, we sponsored Vietnam families.
Well, and we may be called as a church to help with that, so, you know.
We are always called to look beyond race, beyond religion even, beyond ethnicity. And again, it speaks to the heart of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, to look at people solely with compassion and not to make those judgments on what they've done, what their culture is, how they behave. So let's conclude with that and take your time mingling because the sky has opened up, as Tom mentioned. Let's close in prayer. Loving God, we thank you for the dialogue and the fellowship. Though we may not always see eye to eye, that is okay because we are united as your beloved people, created by you, redeemed by you, and made to love others as we've been loved by you. May you continue to guide all that we say and that we do. May compassion be the thing that flows out from within us rather than selfishness and evil. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And don't judge others.